Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. We are still discussing Sandra Brown's book. We are now on the dangerous person, of which she refers to as the addict. Party boy may seem to promise a good time, but by the end of the chapter, you'll understand why he or she, well, party boy, okay, he offers less than a good time for you or anyone else. So Paul or Paula, party boy / party girl, this dangerous person tends to produce a dichotomous reaction in partners. We either shiver or shrug. We either fear it for the pain and havoc it can create in our lives, or we think it isn't someone to be feared by us, which leads us to believe that it's not an issue. Many partners end up with addicts precisely because they are not on the lookout for them. In some cases, partners don't even know what addictions are all about. Addictions can be loosely grouped into two categories, only one of which is widely familiar. The more well-known category includes the obviously harmful addictions to substances, such as drugs or alcohol, or to behaviors such as gambling or sex. The other category encompasses what Sandra calls pseudo-productive addictions. These include behaviors we are not used to thinking of as addictive, such as addiction to work or productivity. We don't think of them as addictive because most of us embrace the American work ethic. What's more American than hard work? But when such behavior turns compulsive, it can create a truly destructive pattern. Pseudo-productive addictions can take several forms. Some people work to an extent that they have no time for their families. Workaholism. Some are overachievers for whom nothing is never enough in terms of their own accomplishments. Some expect perfection from self and others, and some constantly seek approval. An even more insidious pseudo-productive addiction is one in which a person works extremely hard to rescue loved ones or family members, who are often other addicts. By never allowing them to face the consequences of their own behavior, it's common for several different types of pseudo-productive addictions to overlap in a person. Of course, both men and women can be addicts of any type. On the surface, pseudo-productive addictions do not look like the dangerous behaviors that come to mind when we discuss addictions. They may even seem somewhat satisfying to the addict and members of the family. After all, they can result in the addict getting ahead, making lots of money, or acquiring attention and approval. By contrast, the other category of addictions, which we might call unproductive addictions, seems so fruitless. These addicts may lose everything. They often can't hold down a job. They spend money on gambling, drugs, alcohol, pornography, or thrill-seeking behaviors. But anyone who has lived with someone who has a pseudo-productive addiction knows very well these types of addictions take the same toll on the addict and the family as the unproductive ones. You might think addictions would be easily identifiable, but sometimes certain behaviors have been normalized by entire generations within a family. Children and grandchildren grow up and adopt the lifestyle, making it just what the family does. The identities of individuals and of entire families may be tied to various addictions. This can be seen in families who have worked in their own business day and night to the exclusion of any kind of family life. It can be seen in families whose members have worked in casinos, horse racing, family-owned bars, strip joints, shady lady, or other businesses whose success may rely on the addictions of customers and owners. To opt for something besides working in the family business or participating in the addiction is to deny your family heritage. Sometimes we miss addictions in individuals who seem unlikely candidates for them. Who would suspect an 80-year-old woman who occasionally bartends at the local VFW to be a binge alcoholic and gambler? She bet the dogs, the horses, the sports, bingo, every raffle known to man, basically anything that had odds attached to it. On Friday afternoon, she went to the VFW and she wouldn't return home until Monday. While she was there, she danced and partied, played poker, gambled, and worked a shift or two. Everyone marveled at the busy life she led for her age. In reality, however, she was busy indulging her addictions. But many others in her family have served at the VFW hall in much the same way she did. Addictions get overlooked because they become part of the family fabric or history. Sandra says she makes this point to emphasize the fact that the issue of addiction is important in a person's life, not only in terms of the addicts he or she might date, but also in terms of the hidden addictions that might lurk in her or himself or the family. People who have family histories of overt or covert addictions are more likely to date addicts. And getting involved with an addict guarantees a boomerang effect in your life. Addiction 101 teaches us that the person's addiction impacts everyone around him or her. Even if you're only casually dating an addict, you will eventually be affected by the lifestyle, because all addictions are life-disrupting. Addicts battle lifelong urges. Even some in recovery have continual relapses, no matter what they use as their agent of addiction, the substance or behavior that serves as their drug of choice. It is common for addicts to flip back and forth between periods of actively using and periods of sobriety. Having a period of sobriety does not mean the problem is over. Relapses can happen after 20 years of sobriety. Switching addictions, for example, giving up alcohol and then starting a daily marijuana habit, is also common. Furthermore, an addict's dysfunctional, destructive, or low-functioning behaviors can continue if he or she is not using. A lengthy period of sobriety does not automatically mean that an addict has worked on the issues connected with the addiction. And it certainly doesn't mean the addict has developed any relationship skills. This is called dry drunk behavior, even if the addiction is not to alcohol. An addict can be clean and sober and still be emotionally and relationally messed up. If you are looking for a person who's active in its addiction to sweep you off to Barbados for a weekend, think again. Addictions rob individuals and families of financial resources, or of time in the case of the pseudo-productive addictions. It is not uncommon for addicts to have financial difficulties they do not disclose to you. Gambling, pornography, sex, drugs, and alcohol are expensive, and the amount they cost continues to go up. That's because the addict always uses more and more and more and more. All addictions are progressive. There are no regressive addictions. If occasional out-of-control usage does not concern you, consider this. It is estimated that 80% of all domestic violence is committed under the influence of drugs or alcohol. An addict's problem means the deck is stacked against his or her, consistently treating you with respect. People with certain mental illnesses are especially prone to addiction. Individuals with this combination are the least likely to maintain sobriety. The combo pack of mental illness and the addiction is especially seen in individuals with bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, or borderline personality disorder. It is also seen in other disorders besides those listed here. Check with a mental health professional for more information about addictions and mental illness. Who do they seek? It may seem like an anomaly that some women, especially those who abuse substances themselves or who were raised in homes where one or both parents abused substances, are not particularly on alert against addicts. They tend to fall prey to addicts because this type of behavior now seems normal to them. To hear them tell it, women, or as I might add, men, who were raised in homes where addiction was present often swear that they will never date anyone who has an addiction, yet time and time again they end up with someone who has an addiction, hidden or otherwise. For an addict, finding another addict who will not nag or complain about his or her usage is primary. This means people who have their own addictions, even if it doesn't match the other person's, are the number one dating choice. Running a close second will be the person who was raised in a home where addiction was present, even if the person doesn't use. Because such a person will know the addict's games and cover-ups and is familiar with what's expected in order to be with someone who is using. The two share a mutual history and understanding. Addicts seek partners who are long-suffering and who nurse a belief that the addict is going to quit. Many addicts say they are going to quit or are actively quitting, and they may be sincere, even when they remain unsuccessful. If someone is actively using or has just recently quit, any significant improvement in behavior, employment status, finances, and relationship skills could still be years away. When an addict stops engaging in the addictive behavior or partaking of the addictive substance, real change is not immediate. This means that those of us who have an overdeveloped tolerance for a partner's underemployment and mood swings and who tend to minimize our own needs will rate high with an addict. Those of us who suffered abuse as a child or assault as an adult seem particularly drawn to addicts. The after effects of any kind of violence leave us vulnerable to selecting relationships that replay earlier emotional, physical, or sexual trauma. Being involved in a relationship with an addict that leaves you with your needs unfulfilled bears a strong resemblance to the emotional trauma of earlier episodes of abuse. Now, why are these addicts successful? The reasons why addicts are dangerous and successful are not always obvious. This is especially true if a person doesn't understand the field of addictions. Some people do not know the signs of addiction and thus fall prey by ignorance. But there are plenty of people who have knowingly dated addicts because they didn't believe that the addiction presented any danger to them. Even if they realized their partner was playing with things that could harm him or her personally. Again, if we do not tell ourselves the truth about our real motives for dating, such as saying, "I'm just dating her or him for the fun of it," chances are good that sooner or later we'll end up seriously involved with an addict. Naivete is not a life skill, and let's not overlook the person who thinks it's our lot in life to change the addict or sober him or her up. The belief that we can love someone into straightness is all too common. Now, partners who remain active in their addictions are often successful at keeping their partners in relationships because they promise to quit. Either they never follow through with the promise, or they simply switch addictive agents. Many addicts have multiple addictions that take turns surfacing and then going underground. Partners often think their partners are clean because they aren't looking for the signs and symptoms of different addictions. And it's not only the addict's partner who is fooled by this. Often, the unrecovered addict is too. If he or she was a drug addict and merely drinks beer now, to him or her, they're no longer using. Common switches include replacing drugs and or alcohol with sex or food, replacing thrill-seeking behavior with unprotected sex, and replacing work addictions with serial relationships or gambling. Cycles of multiple addictions can take years to play out. A woman or man may ride a wave of hopefulness when they see the partner not drinking, only to find out that it's using cocaine. Each go-round can hook us in for extended lengths of time while we think we're seeing a period of sobriety, only to find out that the addiction's simply been switched. Maybe what we are addicted to is hope. Since many addictions are kept private, if you're involved with an addict, unfortunately, you will not always know when or if you are at risk financially, sexually, physically, or emotionally. And Sandra says that every woman she's ever met who dated or married an addict has said the same thing. When he's not using, he's the best guy in the whole world. Addicts tend to be pretty charming people on their good days. They have to be in order for their partners to remain willing to tolerate the other 80% of the time. Nice guys, girls, good guys, girls, generous, big-hearted, cutie, sweetie, whatever your euphemism is for them. Remember that most of the time they are addicts whose behavior will cause you heartbreak. And chances are good they will always struggle with what they are currently fighting. That's a guarantee as long as an addict is still using. The addict's road to recovery is a long and winding one, littered with the lives of past partners and children who got lost along the way. Now I will give you one of her stories. This is Annie's story. This story illustrates the potentially endless downward spiral a person's life can take if they get seriously involved with an addict. Annie's story. Some of Annie's family members were addicted to alcohol, so Annie felt she was fairly tuned in to the issue of substance abuse. That's why in high school, she specifically avoided dating anyone that she saw at parties drinking too much or using drugs. Instead, she dated Bobby, whom she knew all through high school and had been friends with for years. He was a heavy-set guy with a great personality who charmed everyone he met. They both went away for college and reconnected during a visit home. By then, Bobby had slimmed down and had grown up emotionally. The relationship began to build. Annie had gone to college frat parties. She knew what the scene was about and was not above a little partying herself on occasion. But her alcohol usage, she felt, was truly recreational. She was entering the medical profession and needed to keep her nose clean. So the allure of partying quickly faded as Annie approached graduation and the responsibilities of a career in medicine. By now, Annie and Bobby had been friends for years and had dated exclusively over the past 2 years. They decided to marry. She began working at a daily hospital shift from 3 to 11 p.m., while he struggled to maintain consistent work. She wasn't sure what the problem was with his ability to keep steady work. She thought he was trying to find himself in his work. He hadn't completed college like she had. In fact, there wasn't much he had completed. But she continued to support his efforts to try to find his niche in the working world. Bobby got a job working nights as a waiter. When Annie got home from work after 11 o'clock p.m., he was rarely there. He usually worked until the early hours of the morning, but she wondered whether people really ate out at 3 o'clock a.m. Soon, money was just not as regular as it had been. Bad tips, a slow night, a scheduled night off. He had all sorts of reasons for his dwindling income. Before long, Annie was totally supporting the two of them. Shortly thereafter, she found out the real reason for his lack of a steady income. He was abusing drugs and alcohol. Annie was a registered nurse and used her knowledge to persuade Bobby to get into drug treatment. He would emerge from rehab and function well for a few weeks or months, only to relapse eventually. Year after year, the pattern remained the same. Ultimatums were given and broken, and the debt for unpaid rehab bills mounted. Bobby was arrested and bailed out on such a regular basis that Annie had difficulty concentrating at work. She was constantly distracted with his drug problem, and it was affecting her job performance. So, Annie ended the marriage. Years later, she is still getting reports of his constant battle with addiction and homelessness. She feels bad that his life ended up this way, but she does not feel bad that she ended the marriage. That could have been her life too. Now, your defense strategy would be, well, Sandra says, addictions, even the pseudo-productive ones, often run in families. But to be able to see addiction and avoid making the mistake of making it seem normal to you, you must first look into your own family and your own history to see if covert or overt addictions exist or existed there. In Sandra's research, the people who did not see an addict headed into their lives either had addicts in their families and thus were used to being around them, or had not spent any time around addicts and thus did not know what to look for. In this chapter, she has provided clues to look for if you are unfamiliar with the face of addictions. To begin looking at your own history and that of your family to see if addictions reside there, consider attending meetings of Al-Anon or another 12-step program. Al-Anon is for family members of friends of alcoholics. Many other 12-step groups exist for dealing with all sorts of addictions. They're called 12-step programs because they are based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. These groups can help you take what they refer to as a fearless moral inventory of yourself and your family to assess if addictions are present. It's important to remember that addicts are often attracted to addicts, a classic combination for a person who's addicted to relationships to get involved with another person who's addicted to alcohol and drugs. Once you've looked into your own life and your family's history for the presence of overt and covert addictions, you can begin to examine dangerous people in a new light. In order to recognize an addict, you have to know what addiction looks like in your family, in yourself, and in him or her and his or her family. Your ability to name your family's addictive behaviors will go a long way towards helping you to identify them in a potentially dangerous partner. If you were raised in an addictive family, you are at particular risk for repeating this dynamic by getting involved with an addict. But with the information gained by reading this chapter and by examining and reflecting on your family patterns, you can develop a strategy of watching even more closely for addicts attempting to come in under your radar. To help you really hone your sense of when an addict's entering your life, consider going to counseling or Al-Anon and asking friends to help you watch vigilantly. An addict who is active in the addiction qualifies as a bad dating choice, period, with no exceptions. But what about an addict who is sober or in recovery? In these cases, Sandra says to proceed with caution. As she emphasized earlier, be aware that just because someone is no longer using his or her drug of choice or no longer engaging in the addictive behavior, that does not mean the person will not relapse. And even if a sober addict never relapses, that doesn't mean he or she has any relationship skills. On the other hand, many addicts successfully stay sober and also go on to grow emotionally and to develop good relationship skills. So that takes care of this chapter.
Well, evidently, I'm not the most popular clone in the cloning center. My little idea of stealing Michael Jackson's noses didn't prove to be too practical.
I must admit, I am still the narcopath, but I've been extremely distracted with the possibility of fortune and fame. In fact, remember, I signed my name in blood.
I'm here to assure you that human cloning is very safe and very practical. There's no need anymore to worry about such petty things as malfunctions, because those just don't happen anymore. And I'm living proof. So, I would suggest that...
Don't worry about her. She malfunctioned. I'm her replacement. I'm on fire!